My name is Sachin Deodhar. As you might see from the brochure, this is track 2, and it's more or less a technical track. Welcome to the CISO Platform Annual Summit. I think it's CISO only actually. My talk was a bit of an outlier in terms of the content, so I wasn't sure that would have to be. As the title suggests, I'm going to speak on a new breed of cyber attacks, and I think, as I'll make it fairly clear right in the beginning, it's really not the title is targeting unmanned aerial vehicles. The original title was Cyber Attacks Against UAVs. I disagreed with the title because I felt it was not entirely accurate. The attacks that I'm going to talk about, or rather the attack that I'm going to talk about, is really a hybrid attack. It consists of components of cyber attack combined with electronic warfare attacks. And the targets for these attacks are going to be unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs as they're popularly known, colloquially also known as drones in some circles, especially the military circles. So this is a demo presentation, so I'm not going to go too much into the introduction. I work with Zscaler, which is a cloud security services company. I work in their security research group. This is one of my peripheral areas of interest. It's not really what I do in my day job. It's some product of some work that I did with the academic institutions and the defense community. So that's me, and my interests primarily are in advanced persistent threats, attacks on cyber physical systems such as SCADA control systems, power grids, air traffic control systems, nuclear reactors, and so on. And also the new paradigm of psychological cyber warfare, or psychological cyber operations, PsyOps. So let's quickly get into the taxonomy and the definitions. So what is an unmanned aerial vehicle? Very simply put, it's an aircraft with no pilot on board. Now, that implies that it could either be remotely controlled, or it could be controlled autonomously without any pilot needed to control the aircraft in flight. UAVs and drones, people use these terms interchangeably, so I really believe that a taxonomy, a formal way of referring to these entities is required. There are many different ways to think about UAVs, based on the types of missions, the kind of payloads it carries, the levels of endurance, its degree of autonomy, and so on. And most importantly, not all UAVs are armed, and not all UAVs are used in the military. In fact, there are more civilian applications of UAVs than there are military applications. So if you want to look at a typical UAV systems architecture, it's not just the remotely piloted vehicle, or it's not just the vehicle in the sky. It consists of many different components. So as you can see in this figure above, the unmanned aircraft, it's like they used something like a Predator drone there as an example. It communicates with satellites for navigation and control. Then there is a fixed satellite relay site. It could be one or more. And then that communicates with the fixed ground control station. It also interfaces with various battlefield elements like the soldier. It acquires target location, it identifies the targets, it relays these coordinates to either the soldier or to the ground control station. And there is also usually a mobile unit of the ecosystem, which is the launch and recovery ground control station. So in case something goes wrong in flight, then the UAV will make an emergency landing, and then there is this recovery station that is deployed, usually on a truck or on some kind of a mobile vehicle platform. So all the communication between the ground control systems and the UAV and the battlefield elements, these are all radio signals of different types. They're called data links. So what do attacks against UAV platforms look like? Now the reason why we are talking about this is because these attacks have happened in the past. And in fact, this turbo presentation is going to demystify one such attack. This was an attack in which allegedly the Iranians hijacked an American drone, the RQ-170 stealth Sentinel drone, which was on a surveillance mission over Iranian airspace. And Iran claimed that they took control over the drone and successfully landed on an Iranian airbase. The Americans denied it, the Iranians provided more proof. The Americans then came back and said, yes, actually it did happen. So, when faced with irrefutable evidence that it did in fact happen. So let's talk about what type of attacks are really feasible, because the media kind of exaggerates a whole lot and says cyber attacks against UAVs. That probably means that we can, sit on a laptop at home, connect to the internet, and probably control an aircraft from the sky. That's not really true. So the attack vectors and techniques are highly target specific. So those attack vectors and techniques that may work successfully against the AR drone that's commercially available, you can purchase it online. It won't be feasible against, the RQ-170 stealth Sentinel drone. Attacks are also more effective against civilian UAVs because the communication protocols are less secured or less protected. The information about them is more widely available, so hackers and engineers can figure out ways to impact the operation of the UAV in an adverse way, more so for civilian drones than for UAV drones. The attacks exploit either the software, or they exploit the communication link, or they exploit something entirely different, and that's the subject of this talk. Is that they exploit vulnerabilities or weaknesses in the navigation and control systems. Especially the most vulnerable protocol out there is the GPS protocol, or the GPS signals themselves. And remember here, the guys from the defense community are going to say, well, military GPS signals are secured and encrypted, and you really can't unravel the data. It's secured. But that's the beauty of this attack, because you don't really actually have to decode anything. You don't have to decrypt anything. You just have to perform two things. You need to jam the GPS signal, and then you need to spoof the GPS signal and inject it and feed it to the UAV. So it believes that the spoofed GPS signal to be the correct one, and then follows a path which it believes to be the correct path, but then it actually ends up landing somewhere else, quite literally in this particular case. So, something about the RQ-170 tells us what are we dealing with here. This drone is quite large. It was made by Skunk Works, the top secret division of Lockheed Martin, and was made for the United States Air Force. It has a composite material construction, which means that it's highly stealthy to radars. Its radar signature looks nothing like the actual drone itself. So the enemy radar systems will probably not pick up the movement of this UAV in its airspace. There is a camera, very high resolution, very sophisticated camera payload which is right under its nose. It has radar and signals intelligence payloads which are under its belly of the UAV. And the missions it usually accomplishes are I-star missions, which is intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and target acquisition. And occasionally it is used for electronic warfare, like for jamming radio signals and so on. So that's what it looks like. That's the specs of the drone. So, I can send this presentation across to you in case you need to see the details, but essentially it's basically a visual representation of what I just said in the earlier slide. Now, people are probably wondering, how did this happen? How did the Iranians, who are technologically perceived to be less sophisticated than the Americans, how did they end up successfully hijacking a very expensive, highly sophisticated drone belonging to the US military? So, this was done on the 4th of December 2011 over the Iranian airspace. The Iranian claim was initially refuted by the US Department of Defense. They said that this is Iranian propaganda. So it's like the UAV was brought down by its cyber warfare unit, which commandeered the aircraft and safely landed it, implying that they were somehow able to hijack the drone itself and have it successfully land on their airbase instead of its home base in Afghanistan, which is from where it had originally taken off. The attack consisted of, now this is based on the Iranian reports, the attack consisted of jamming both satellite and land originated control signals to the UAV, primarily in this case the GPS signals, followed by a GPS spoofing attack to feed false coordinates to the UAV. And when asked how it was able to actually jam and then spoof the GPS signals, the Iranians reported that they were able to do so with the help of the 1L222 analyst system, which was supplied to Iran by Russia. These details are important because when I get to talking about technical feasibility of such an attack, these points are going to matter. This was the original Persian but written in the Arabic script report, a small excerpt of that, not the entire one. And its translation is quite amusing to read. It says, by putting the noise on the communications, you force the bird into autopilot. This is where the bird loses its brain. The spoofing took into account precise landing altitudes as well as its latitudinal and longitudinal data, made the drone land on its own where we wanted to without having to crack the remote control signals and communications from the US control center. So this is saying that we did so without having to crack or decode or decrypt any signals. We were able to do so simply by jamming the navigation and control signals. In this case, they mean GPS, and by jamming the signals first and then feeding false coordinates, false GPS data to the UAV was then made to land, or it was hijacked and made to land on Iranian airbase. That's the picture of the actual alert system used to generate, first of all, a jam, create the noise and then generate a spoofed GPS data, and then send it to the drone. This has a range of around 150 kilometers, so it's a very high-end, extremely sophisticated. Only a few countries in the world, Israel, Russia and America, and I think China makes such kind of mobile alien systems which are mounted on a truck. So once the Americans refuted, the Iranians came back with photographs. So here you go, this is the drone, this is your drone. And by the way, I have several pictures. This is a short talk, so I'm just going to give you the highlights. So let's summarize the RQ-170 drone capture. So this is not a cyber attack. This itself, these few slides should tell you that this is not a cyber attack. It's not someone launching a buffer overflow exploit against a server located somewhere and then gaining access to that server. This is someone with highly sophisticated resources, a lot of money, probably a nation-state sponsored entity, or it's not a lone wolf attack as we call it in the defense or security community. It's not someone sitting alone doing this. It's not even a small group, organized or unorganized. This is a cyber warfare / electronic warfare unit of the military or the armed forces, having access to the alert system and having access to the technology with which to practice and experiment before actually making this attack perfect before launching it. It consists of two stages. The first stage is to jam the GPS signal. So the drone, which has latched on to a subset of this GPS satellites in the constellation, suddenly for a brief period of time loses contact with the GPS signals from outer space. At that point in time, using a technique called synchrophasing, you then start to bombard this UAV with signals that emanate or originate from your alert device, the alert equipment. And these are time-phased and synchronized so that the UAV itself doesn't recognize these to be rogue signals. It feels, from the UAV's point of view, I'm here now, I suddenly forget where I am, and in the very next instant, I'm somewhere else. But the UAV is not a human being, so the UAV continues to think it is where it is, and it was just a minor glitch, loss of signal, but now it's back online. And it doesn't have to execute its fly to home maneuver, which is the maneuver it will execute in case there is an actual disturbance in the signal, a long-term disturbance in the signal, in which case it would land back on its Afghanistan home base. GPS. So it's a very opportunistic attack. It has to be skillfully executed. Now the constraints and limitations are severe. First of all, you need the electronic warfare equipment to jam and spoof military GPS with 5-band signals. The attack itself is it's moderately sophisticated. It's not something that requires a rocket scientist, literally. It can be done by an engineer who knows enough about the GPS protocol, and he can set up a DSP-based board to actually generate these signals, and assuming he has the electronic warfare equipment to project those signals at a sufficient distance and at a sufficient strength, he can execute the attack. However, its execution is limited by access to technology, which is the reason why my contention is that this can't be performed by someone sitting at home or even a small academic institution, team in an academic institution doing this. Now, some who have read the literature will say, well, University of Texas at Austin did it. In fact, I collaborated with them recently, and we actually did a revised version of this attack. This was done initially shown by them a couple of years ago, and then we kind of renewed that. And that's the hidden slides portion of my talk. Since this is a very short talk, I think I've run out of time already. So, but whoever is interested, I can actually show you the complete presentation. We have a proof of concept set up. So we have a DSP board, we have a GPS proofer, we have the architecture, everything is done. It was tested in the US in February or March this year, and it worked fine. But there were lots of assumptions had to be made. So we couldn't do the same with our little $2,000 piece of equipment to the RQ-170, but we could do it to an AR drone, a Parrot AR drone, which we purchased online. So there were several differences. One, this was the non-military civilian GPS L1 band. Two, we had to be in close proximity to the drone, and the drone itself could not be too far away from where we were. Three, we used software-defined radio and a Linux box, a laptop with a small antenna. We did not have the power or the strength to project these signals at an altitude of 50,000 feet, or 60,000 feet, which is where the RQ-170 drone was while performing its surveillance mission. So the purpose of this talk was to show that there is potential for cyber attacks to evolve further into more hybrid forms of attack. Stuxnet is an example where, for example, the first time where a cyber attack was used to cause a kinetic impact on actual physical infrastructure and installations, such as the centrifuge plants in Iran. There is potential, but we can't just go by the media when they say, a lot of things in the media makes it appear like these things are trivial, but they are not. One really needs to understand, do the analysis of the attack itself and look at the capabilities versus what needs to get done for the attack to be successful. So, like I said, the presentation really short, but whoever is interested can come to me offline and I can show you lots of more interesting details about this attack and how it could be replicated. So I just wanted to use a case study driven